All right, we are live. Welcome everyone to Ordinary People Doing Extraordinary Things. I'm your host, Keri Roberts, and I have two very exciting, extraordinary guests that I am very honored to have here today. I have Mark Victor Hansen, and many of you might know him as the co-author and creator of Chicken Soup for the Soul book series, and his wonderful wife, Dwyer Hansen. She is an entrepreneur and business strategist, and they are here to talk about their new book, which is called Ask: The Bridge from Your Dreams to Your Destiny. So welcome, both of you, for being here.
Thank you for having
Keri. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Yeah, so if you are watching live and you have questions as we're talking, you can put them in the comments and we're happy to have them answer that as well. So I want to start actually with the dedication that you have in your book. And you both wrote that your parents, who allowed us to ask and who nurtured our respective journeys toward fulfilling our destinies. And I'm curious, how did your parents raise each of you, and how do you think that affected who you are and who you've become as a person?
Go ahead. You first.
So I was raised in a family with 9 children, same 2 parents. So that is an interesting kind of socialization. And I'm really so thankful for it. I know, I had 3 children of my own, and I don't know how I could have had 9, but my mother was just amazing. And, but in that process, in that socialization, you really had to learn how to form alliances, and really stand up and kind of be heard. And a lot of that included asking questions, and really challenging what was, in a way, and my parents were very nurturing about that. They would always try to get us to see ourselves in a bigger way. If we were scared to do something, they'd say, why can't you do it? You're great at this. So they'd get us to ask those questions. So I'm really thankful for that. And we both reflected on that when we started, writing this book, and thought how blessed we were to have parents who nurtured our curiosity in that way.
I'm son of Danish immigrants. My daddy owned a little bakery, and my mother's really one who taught me how to sell. I desperately wanted a bicycle when I was 9 years old, and I read Boy Scout Life magazine because my parents clearly didn't have the money to have it and kept saying no, but I was rejection-proof then, and I'm still rejection-proof, I'm thankful to say, and a bold, fearless asker, my wife tells me.
Yes, he is.
So it said in Boy Scout Life you could sell greeting cards at consignment. I looked up that word in my little Webster dictionary, and I said, oh, that means oh boy, this is cool. So I went up to neighbors that were like you, and I knocked at the door, and I said, I'm earning my own bicycle. Would you like to invest in 1 box of Christmas cards or 2? As I was trudging through the snow of Waukegan, Illinois, outside of Chicago, when I was a little kid. I sold 376 boxes of Christmas cards in basically a month or a month and a half, more than anyone else, won the award. And so I learned how to sell and handle rejection, and it's been good stead to me since then. And I'm very thankful my parents supported my vast curiosity, and I'm one of 4 brothers, and all have done well. But I just been beyond excited that we've discovered the secret, and the secret is you got to learn to ask.
I love that. And speaking of asking, I want to ask just a little bit on your background, Mark. You created Chicken Soup for the Soul with Jack Canfield. And I want to say you put out Chicken Soup for the Teenage Soul in 1997. I was 11 years old, and my mom bought me that book, and I read that book. I remember laughing. I remember crying. And I think there's some similarities in how I do this podcast. I've always been fascinated by these kind of stories of human connection. And so I'm curious, back then, how did you decide that you wanted to do that? And how did you feel about it kind of becoming so large? Like, what made it work so well?
Well, there's a lot of parts to making it large. The Chicken Soup of the Teenage Soul was our biggest one-off. We sold 19 million copies. And prior to that, our publisher said, this time you guys have blown it. And I knew, I said, this is it. This is going to be the big one.
Yeah.
And I said, I've got teenagers. The publisher said they buy CDs, concert tickets, clothes, and they go to the mall. And when they come home, they say, you say, what happened to the $50 I gave you? And said, the mall ate it. And they go, and you were there, so you understand. And we now say that teenage soul, and a lot of your listeners have teenagers, is that the kid ought to read it to the parents, and it'll open up both their hearts. So that's what I teach. What we did is we wrote it, and while we were doing it, we had somebody trying to buy us because we were number 1 for 58 weeks in a row with Chicken, number 1 and number 2. a guy at Time Magazine who's still a great friend, Larry Kirschbaum. And Larry's daughter ran Nickelodeon. And he said, why don't you talk to her and see if you can get the kids to test it? And this is a front end of the internet. And so we had it tested by 12,000 kids. And Jack and I had 250 stories that we'd written and edited, and we knew they would work. And the kids said, these are the stories that are 10 plus. And so the book was a grand slam home run. I'm just telling you, and we're still thankful for that.
Well, and they asked the audience. That was the magic of that. Like when we talk about in our book, it's so important to ask your client or ask your audience, what do you want? What are you looking for? Instead of just assuming that you know and trying to sell them something. Yeah,
the point being is that most publishers, and I love the book business, I love publishers, I love all my colleague writers, so that's not the issue. The issue is most people write a book and they do it in isolation, then they give it to an editor or editors or a ghost or whatever they do, and then the publisher, and so 2 or 3 people read it. We have every one of our story read by a gazillion people, like you've already read our book before it comes out, and you're going to have to comment on it. You were telling us before we came on what you felt, but I'm not trying to lead the witness as a
Yeah, no, I think that's a really important point, which I love. And I'm also curious, Crystal, you have written a ton of books yourself as well. What is the difference between writing for yourself versus writing with Mark?
I wondered how the process was going to go because I had never written a book with someone else. And it was amazing how smoothly it unfolded. And I think Mark and I just kind of naturally gravitated to our strengths. And we both have a way of just doing what we each know we do well. And so we just did that. And, he handled a lot of reaching out to some of these amazing people and getting those interviews. I do a lot of the writing I'm a transformational life coach, clinical hypnotherapist. So I do a lot of that sort of writing, the transformational reflection type of thing. But we both have done a lot of inspirational stuff. So, we would both write chunks of the book and then come together and say, okay, how does this fit? And, it was kind of magical because it came together sort of magically, surprisingly. And at the end of it, we were both surprised that it went so smoothly, honestly.
Yeah. And I think, as I was saying, I was reading the book and you have so many stories in it, which reminds me of Chicken Soup for the Soul in a sense. Right. You have stories of higher level people, of everyday people, and also of yourselves, which I think is really nice. It kind of gives an insight into who both of you are as well from past until now. You had in the beginning of the book, I wanted to read something. You said, asking is the only language to which the universe can deliver a solution, understanding, illumination, or plan. Asking is a cultivated art, science, and talent. In fact, there is no mechanism that has the ability to reveal what is hidden like asking. Everyone is quick to say how others should lead their lives, but only a few ask, how should I lead mine? Every question ignored can become a curse. Every question to which you pay attention reaps a blessing. And I'm curious because I read that and I was like, nodding my head, yes. Everybody's always telling everyone else what to do. Exactly. But if you ask them, what do you want to do? Or if they sit down, they're so scared to even just sit down and have that question, that conversation with themselves. Why do you think that is?
Well, we got 7 roadblocks to asking, but I want to go even deep on what you just said. The times that we're in now where people are a little bit incarcerated and in isolation, it behooves them to really do what we love. Socrates said, the unexamined life's not worth living. Right. And what we're saying is, you really want to get a hold of this book, Ask, the bridge from your dreams to your destiny, because we think everyone has a great destiny, but the only way to get there is deep, reflective, probing, insightful asking. And what Crystal brilliantly told me one day is that the minute you ask, your mind vectors, it's teleological, but more importantly, it starts to pop different brain cells. And we think it's the only way to open up whatever number there are of brain cells, 18 billion.
Right. We did a lot of research on this book, and there's been a lot of research done on asking. And when you ask yourself a question, it literally lights up a different part of your brain. So your brain becomes a better resource to you. And that's what asking is about. And in any transformational situation, in any situation, any crisis situation, this isn't the only crisis we're ever going to go through. Right now we're all in sort of this crisis together. But we've all had many personal crises, and and it'll happen again and again. That's just the journey of life. So it's important to figure out those simple tools that can get us unstuck. And I've just found again and again with my clients, the journey out of something that you don't like, something that you're unhappy with, always requires deep, reflective asking. And when you start asking, and that's why we have the 3 sections, we say there are 3 channels through which you can ask. Ask yourself, ask others, and ask God. So when you start asking yourself those questions, suddenly you start tapping into your own resources. When you open up to God and universe, you start getting illuminations that you otherwise wouldn't have seen, wouldn't have understood. And the answers start coming, and that becomes the journey. That's why we say asking, it literally becomes like this bridge from your dreams that are kind of held inside, but you're stuck and you don't know where to go. That asking becomes that bridge to achieving your destiny, because every time you ask and you get another answer, a problem gets resolved, you see the next step forward, you get an illumination, you're one step further, and then it opens up more questions. And then, to expand from there, asking other people to be a resource to you, because we are all here to be a resource to one another. But that seems to be the hardest thing for people, is to ask.
It's true. And as you were saying, you had 7 roadblocks that are pretty common, which you had unworthiness and insecurity, naivety, doubt, excuses, fear, pattern paralysis, and disconnection.
Yep.
I'd love for you to explain a few of them. And I'm curious, is there one that people tend to have more of? Is there one that's just more common amongst people, or no?
I think the most common is unworthiness. It's sort of this conditioning, and oftentimes we can't even connect to where it started, but a little bit of unworthiness that this is the feeling that we just don't deserve more or don't deserve better. And so we settle and we stop asking, and we're afraid of, the other one is just fear, just flat out fear of rejection. And it's funny, because fear of rejection comes from all of us as human beings have a deep need to be loved. And we feel like somehow at a really primitive level, if we're rejected, that somehow we're not going to be loved. It's like someone's rejecting us personally. So these are so important to try to overcome. Pattern paralysis is just this brain conditioning, sort of like habits that you repeat over and over again, where you just haven't, you get stuck in a pattern. And we give some stories of that, some examples of that in the book, where you just are stuck in your rut and you do it over and over again, and you just don't look for any new thing. And so by looking at these roadblocks, we're hoping that people can start doing that self-reflection and saying, what are my roadblocks? Where am I stuck? One of my favorite ones that I wrote about was naivete. Like, I write about Imelda and the mangoes, and the story of when, my children were really young, and we had this wonderful little Filipina woman who was helping me with the children. She was the most loving, amazing person. And she would cook these wonderful meals for us, and we loved, the ethnic meals she was cooking us. So one day she shows up with this fruit, and she cuts it up, and it's juicy and wonderful. I'm like, what? That is the best tasting fruit I've ever had. What is this? And she said, it's a mango. And I'm like, this is a mango? How come I've never tasted a mango before? I grew up in Idaho, where there are lots of potatoes but no mangoes. And I thought, this is so ridiculous. She goes, they're at the grocery store. You can buy them. I thought, what a great lesson, though, because here's something, this delicious, amazing fruit that I could have all the time. I could pick it up every day. But I'm naive. I don't even know what's out there for me, right? So I've been passing it by. And it made me think, what other things in life do I pass by every day? What people do I pass by? What experiences do I just pass by? Because I'm naive. I just haven't been curious enough to open up to those new things, people, and experiences. So that's a really great one for all of us, I think, in some way.
Yeah. And through that list you had in the beginning of it, you talked about how obviously people are afraid of rejection, but there's also the other piece of education, and how in schools, we're kind of taught at a young age in elementary school to not ask questions or to wait to be called on. How does that kind of affect us as well? And how do we get over that?
Well, the story we have on the unworthiness is from our friend Bob Proctor, who's a dear friend for a lot of years. I own 2 companies with him. But Bob, was pushed down, and he always thought he was unworthy and not good enough, and he was insecure, and he didn't want to ask questions and look stupid or dumb or like he didn't know. So he went through the whole Navy up in Canada, and then he comes out and he's a fireman, and he's earning $4,000. This is like 1960. He's earning $4,000 a year and owes $6,000. He said, this clearly doesn't work. And everybody here drinks every night and going to the bar. That's not working. So I'm going to give that up. He goes to the richest, best connected man he knows. And he said, here's the question. And it was his pivotal like question. What is it you're doing to become wealthy, healthy, and have happiness in your life? And the guy said, here's the stuff that you got to do, Bob. And suddenly Bob said, well, wait a second. I got to read this book called Think and Grow Rich, and I got to do what you do, and then I'll become rich. And he looked around and he said, I could wash windows. I'm told that makes a lot of money. He started doing it, and then he exhausted himself. He passed out on the street in Toronto, Canada. The police and the first responders are there and saying, do you want to take you to the hospital? He said, no, I'm just exhausted. Goes home and said, wait a second. If I can't wash all the windows, I'm not going to wash any of them. I'll get other people to do it. Builds an enormous business. So he goes from 4,000 to making 25,000 a month, then to making $1 million a year. And then he owns a business that's in Toronto and Montreal and Atlanta and London, just washing windows, and makes his fortune. And says, well, wait a second. What do I really want to do with my life? Well, now that I know this stuff and I'm studying all what you asked about is academic education, which is really good and important, but because self-help action books, audios, and now podcasts saved my life when I went bankrupt and Bob's, I can tell you unequivocally, it reestablishes your self-worth. It reestablishes your self-esteem. But once you hear that stuff, you got to start saying, what am I going to do about it? Because remember, the questions are really, you're going to ask yourself who you are, who the others are that can help you, and how can you enroll God in your destiny?
Yeah, and I love that story as well. And I think it was his story. There was another quote you had where he was talking about want, which goes back to, Crystal, what you were saying too, this unworthiness. And he had said, want is spirit jabbing you in the consciousness to move you to a better place, a higher level of expression. We always want more than what we've got. And this isn't necessarily to have it, but to experience the growth within ourselves. We're created to expand and grow. And I know I've definitely... It's such a good line. And I read that and I was like, I know I resonate with that. I think a lot of people do, where sometimes you're sitting in this place and you're like, I want to feel grateful. They always talk about gratitude for what I have. Am I being selfish in wanting more? So what is your response to that, or how to deal with that in the form of asking?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Just like Bob said, we are here to grow and expand. And I love, in scripture, it says we're created in the image of the creator. So what does that mean? It means we're creators, and so it's natural for us to expand. If you look at scientifically, our entire universe just continues to expand, and it's mind-boggling. We say, why? Well, that's obviously the nature of God, expansion, the creator of the universe. It's continuing to expand. We want to expand. There's something inside of us that wants to grow, evolve, expand, experience more. We're never done. And if we are done, I think that's when, life is over for us. If we don't continue, that's when we start to feel like giving up. That's when we feel hopeless. So we really need to tap into this opportunity to ask ourselves more questions, to dig deeper inside, to start asking others, to be curious about others, because we can learn so much from other people. And you brought it up before, what happens in school. We're all born these innocent children who are full of curiosity, and we want to ask a lot of questions that we want to know. And then we go to school because, and they've done studies on this, like a lack of time, limited resources, this idea that the teacher is, the authority. You don't challenge that. You're there to be quiet and listen. And so over time, that beautiful curiosity where we just keep asking and asking, and why can't I do this? And, exploring all these possibilities through questioning ourselves, questioning others, that starts to become dampened. So we need to, wake it up, bring it back to life. And that is what Socrates, if you think about it, did. I mean, what was happening at the time is all of the Greek philosophers, what they said was just the accepted. And he said, this isn't true. Why is this true? Why is that true? And he realized that, getting to the truth requires a lot of questions. And so he encouraged everybody to challenge the authority at the time, and it ultimately got him killed. But but it was so wise and so brilliant, because questions are always how we get to the truth, to the next opportunity, to the next reality, to the next place we're supposed to be in this journey, closer to our destiny. And so it's such a beautiful thing, when we can open up to that.
The joke is, of course, that Socrates drank himself to death.
That's so bad.
I know. For those of you that aren't tuned in, though, Socrates was the wisest man of ancient Greece, which is what we model our educational system on at Harvard and MIT and everywhere. The Socratic method. And he taught, of course, Plato, who wrote about it. And then Plato taught Aristotle. Aristotle taught Alexander the Great, who at his time and space control the world. But over the door, Plato's door, he had carved himself, know thyself, which is number one. You got to ask yourself, who am I? What am I going to do? How am I going to contribute? And right now we're all, locked down a little bit, and it's time to figure out, who are you at depth?
Yes.
What is it that you want to contribute? And what we want to do is maximize everybody by helping them ask themselves the best, most profound, insightful, life-advancing questions that they've ever even considered.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the hard part. And in part 3 of your book, you talk about the 4 parts of masterful asking. So if somebody's sitting here saying, okay, I agree, I hear what you're saying, but what questions do I ask? Or how do I ask the right questions? Or how do I frame them in the right way? And I will say that your book lists a ton of fabulous questions. So if you're lost, there's definitely a huge list for you. But how would you suggest that? I know, you kind of broke it down where you say you're not a human being, you're a human becoming, which I love that term. Mm-hmm. So if you want to start with some of those, I'd love to hear how we can kind of just ask better questions.
Right. So preparing to be a good asker, first of all, you have to have a belief. Okay. So we all start, sometimes it's so easy when we feel stuck, when we feel a little hopeless, to just keep descending into that and like caving into that. Okay. But we have to sort of start with this belief that, what, the answers are there for me somewhere. If I just keep asking, they will be there. So belief and trust. Okay. And then action, as we're asking, keep taking action in the step of your dreams. As you get little epiphanies, little ideas come to you, act on those. If you think, well, I just thought of this person who did this, call that person, act on it, take action, like ask them a question. And sometimes you're not even asking, you don't have to ask for a favor. It's okay to ask for a favor, but maybe you just want to ask for insight, I thought of you, your mind came up, I'm thinking about this or this, and you came to mind, and I really respect what you do, and I would just love to hear your thoughts. Do you have any, insights on this? Here's what I'm thinking. And so really taking action is an important part of that. And then visualization, we say that, using your imagination is so important in the asking journey, because it's always best to start with your ideal in mind. Otherwise you might, because some people are lost, you're like, how do I ask? What do I ask for? I don't know where to start. So the simplest rule is to say, and write this down. We say, write down everything, keep this asking journal and keep going back to it again and again. So in my perfect world, whether it's a relationship, a career that you're working on, whatever it is you're working on, this is what the outcome would be, and write down every detail in this outcome. I'm feeling like this, I'm experiencing great joy when I talk to these people. Say it's about your career. I'm so happy that, I'm getting hundreds of more orders a month on my product. I'm so happy that people love the product that I'm selling them. And I'm so happy I can be of service. I've thought of 3 more ideas and iterations. So go to the end game of what you want, like the end outcome in your perfect world, perfect imagination. And then say, okay, work backwards, start asking the questions. How did I get there? How did I get that question answered? How did I find that solution? Who did I talk to? You know, and start to break it down that way. And it's just a really good formula, a really easy formula to get your asking journey laid out in a way that serves you.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I do that a lot, and I don't know about you, the two of you, but sometimes you don't always get the answer right away. I feel like when I do any asking for myself, it takes longer than just 5 minutes. Do you agree?
Let me give my example, if I may. I'm bankrupt in 1974. My worst bad good experience. It was a good bad experience, and I was living in Hicksville, Long Island, New York, with 4 roommates. I went down to breakfast, and after 6 months of feeling self-destructive, I said, is there anybody, I think I want to really be a professional, motivational, inspirational, educational speaker. I listened to this tape and it's giving me a transformation during the worst economy before this one that America had ever had, 1974. I said, is there anybody that is not a cotton top young, that is not a doctor, a lawyer, or a celebrity that's out speaking? And one of my roommates was in real estate. He said, look, there's a guy, we were living in Hicksville, Long Island, New York, so I was literally a hick. And he said, out in Hauppauge, which you know is not that far from you, is it Hauppauge, Long Island, this guy, young guy, a couple years older than you, Chip Collins, is out talking, and he's a wow. You'll like him. It's 8:30. I get my little beat up Volkswagen, the bankruptcy courts are not taken from me, race my little butt out there, sit there in awe as this guy mesmerized the audience. I say, okay, can I take you to lunch? He said, look, kid, the chance of you making it was 1 in 1,000, but I'll give you the 4 questions. If you stay out of real estate, that's my market. Go to the life insurance business, bottomless pit for motivation, sell the agents. I didn't own a life insurance. I didn't know what a premium was. I didn't know any of that stuff. And I started selling the next day, called on 10 people because I said I've been selling since I was 9 years old and fearless. The 10th guy says, big Italian guy says, my name's Tony. I'm the biggest guy here at the Metropolitan. Here's the directory. Go see what you can do. And he bought the seminars because I had 4 seminars I was selling. I didn't know what I was doing, but I was doing it with vim, vigor, vitality, and back to the thing about Bob Proctor, great desire. I knew what I wanted to do. Luckily, it took off, and I did 1,000 talks for the first 3 years. And only, I guess, when I talked to Tony Robbins, he and I are the only 2 guys I know that ever did 1,000 seminars. I do one at 6 in the morning, one at 10, one at 2, one at 6. And in between, I was selling more seminars just because it was easy. I was in, as you know, the metropolitan area has like 18 million people. So there are plenty of life insurance people, you know, and it was endless and it was fun. And I thought I died and gone to heaven. And then I suddenly did books and it worked.
Well, and I love that you're talking about not just asking and answering, but taking action. I think that's a huge part of it as well. And I see we have one person, Melissa has a question. She says, what are some ways that you've learned to trust your inner guidance, intuition, answers you are getting when you do ask? It seems like our minds get so in the way.
Boy, that's really true. You know, for us, I mean, Mark and I have a really strong spiritual practice. And so we spend like an hour every morning in prayer and meditation. And we have just learned to trust. I mean, we've really learned to trust what comes through. Now, obviously, you need to like do your own investigation. I once read something in a book, Stuart Wilde, if you want to be the greatest rock star in the world, you have to get into the quantum soup of being, you know, a rock star. You can't know nothing about what you want to do. So the more you immerse yourself in an area, in a field, in something, okay, so you're gaining knowledge and wisdom about that thing and looking and asking questions of people who are doing what you want to do. And the more questions you ask, the more you immerse yourself in that area, the more you're going to be able to feel like you can trust your answers. And then I really feel like you also become a magnet, because you can say, I want to be a rock star, but if you don't ever listen to any top music and you don't ever practice your drums and you don't ever, you know, write a note, you are not really in alignment with your own, you know, your own desires. So part of it is like really asking yourself, how can I be a magnet for what I desire? How do I immerse myself more in this thing that I'm seeing, in this vision of mine? Who's doing it? What do I need to do more of, read more of, see more of, talk to more people? So that builds a lot of confidence. And as you do that, you literally become a magnet for what you're desiring.
And you got to become monomaniacal. In answer to her question is, and get rid of the distractions. And Crystal correctly said, that's what we do in the morning. We are praying, meditating, and then discussing. Even today, we're discussing some of the stuff we got to shuffle off, because we get invited to do a lot of stuff that I get excited about listening to, but we can't do all of it. It does. My path right now is making this,
right.
As world's best-selling author, I've got to stay on my focus, and I can't solve everybody else's problem. I can solve the problems for the people that are reading the book and want to ask questions. We would gladly tell them, have a monomaniacal focus on what it is you're supposed to do, because everyone has a right livelihood. We believe everyone's got a destiny. We believe everyone's got infinitely more potential than they've used, but it's got to be focused. In other words, if you have a magnifying glass, we've got one here on the desk, and you move it over leaves, it doesn't work. If you hold it stop, and we got the hot sun here in Arizona, in seconds it bursts into flame if it's a dry leaf.
Yeah. So asking, is this in alignment with who I am? I think that's a huge question for people. Is this in alignment? This thing I desire, is this in alignment with who I am? If it feels like it's far away from who you are, then how can you become more immersed in that thing? How can you become more? How can I become more of this? And at the end of the day, you do just need to, after you've done all your work, your belief, your action, there is a point where you do need to surrender and trust. And in some ways in this life, I mean, we all have challenges, but I feel like you make mistakes, but you really can't mess it up completely, because the whole thing is to help you learn and grow. And so sometimes you just have to keep putting that foot forward and keep going, just keep going. And the results and what comes to you is going to help you find your answer. But keep asking yourself, others, and God.
If I can just add to that, when I'm bankrupt and upside down and I decide that I'm going to be a speaker, I wanted to make $400 a day, 250 work days. That equals $100,000 a year. And so I went to bed praying, and I just read a book called The Magic of Belief by Claude Bristol. And it said, what you got to do is do a thought mantra, which I've done a lot of times in my life, and we teach in the book that you say, in my case, 400, I'm going to earn 400 tomorrow, I'm going to earn 400. 2:58 in the night, the digital clock goes blip, blip, and all of a sudden it came to me, and it said State Mutual, a company I'd never heard of, as a life insurance company in New York and Long Island. And then it said Bill Widener, and I never heard of him either, but I knew enough to always go to bed with a little pad and write down both things. Well, the next day I'm out cold calling, and insurance companies are like, McDonald's is next to Taco Bell and all that. I go into this office building, it says State Mutual, Bill Widener, and I go, I never heard of either one of those. It's not in any list. He's certainly not with Metropolitan, which I told you I had the list to. And all the insurance companies are in the same building because they jump people in that, and, from one company to another. So I go to the desk, nobody's there. I go straight to this guy's office. In a few minutes, he wrote me a check for $400. I was charging $100 times 400. He said, I didn't know if you were going to come back, but you were so enthusiastic, so positive. I didn't want to give you the check. And that's what she's saying. The law of attraction. There are people out there that feel that they're upside down. They're hanging on by their fingernails. They're feeling the desperation. And what they need is this podcast of inspiration. And hopefully they'll read our book, Ask, and they'll go to bigger levels and see. That's what it looks like. Here, you can hold up longer than that. I mean, this says reader's copy, which is what you got.
Right.
You had written in the book too about how, be a magnet, don't chase. And I love that line. And I growing up, my mom always has told me everything happens for a reason. And you had written in the book that as well. And I think it goes back to what you're saying. If you start to kind of ask the questions, believe in what you're saying, envision it, surround yourself, act that way, things start to happen for a reason, but it's because you took some sort of action. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes. I mean, you need to ask with your heart, mind, soul, physical body, ask with your, you can't just sit in a room and, think that someone's going to find you someday. It's really asking is an active journey. It really is.
Yeah. Do you have any, we talked a little bit earlier, but especially in times now, which is March 2020, with coronavirus going on and you have people that are home and quote unquote working from home, but it's not true working from home if they have kids and married. Some people have lost jobs. And so when they're kind of in this scared state and it's so extreme, how do they ask the right questions, or maybe what questions should they be asking themselves at this point? Are they different than maybe they would have been 2 months ago?
Totally. Go ahead.
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I think we need to ask ourselves, has the world ever been destroyed before? I mean, have we been able to come back from really difficult times before? And the answer to that is yes, absolutely, right? So instead of freaking ourselves out, we need to, try to remind ourselves, what are the strengths of our country? Somehow we always have a way back. I mean, it's challenging to sit at home, and wait. But imagine for a minute if half of us, probably the males only at the time, were being called out to go fight a war right now. And they were leaving home. So you're home alone with your family, not having any idea of how you're going to survive, if we're going to win, if you're ever going to see your family member back. I mean, we've been through horrible challenges before in so many different ways. And so, I think just asking yourself, have we ever collapsed and just gone away? No, I mean, we're still here. We're still standing. Have we gotten through tough times before? Yes. Will we again? Yes. Yes, we absolutely will. And how many, start thinking about the resources. I tell people, we have the best resources on earth. We're going to find the cure to this virus, and it's going to be fast. So we absolutely cannot give up hope. I mean, I think this is going to be over sooner than we think. And so I think the most important question you can ask yourself right now is, what would I give for time like this, that I'm just home, some kind of free time to expand myself, to teach myself something, to learn something, that when this is over, because it's going to be over, life's going to come roaring back. Who are you going to be? Who am I going to be when life comes roaring back, right? Am I going to be better? How can I be better? What could I do? How could I prepare myself right now when I have this, if you think about it, as precious, valuable time, because time is one of our most precious resources. So now it's being given to us. Our government's going to be taking care of people's basic needs for this, at least for this month. So let's say, what can I do with this valuable time so that I come back a stronger, better, wiser, and more prepared person? And when this country comes back, when our economy comes back and life comes roaring back, what do I want to be doing? How will I be better prepared for that? What steps will I have taken? And that is important. Instead of sitting around, watching Netflix movies, this is your time to prepare. If you think of it as really special time, I know it's challenging at the same time, but it still is time, which is a resource.
The example maybe best is that Elon Musk, who I think is one of the geniuses of our time, sort of the Thomas Edison, they said, well, you've got to shut down your Tesla plant. He said, no, this is an essential resource. And so they wouldn't let him be an essential resource. So he did the question that he said, well, what is it that I could do to keep the plant open? And he immediately calls Medtronics, which makes all the respirators, and says, hey, look, give me the prototype, right? The 3D architecture of this, and I'll make them, because you can't make enough. You don't have them, but I've got metal, I've got manpower, people power. I don't be chauvinistic here. And I've got all the resources. And he said, I'll have all of them in a week. And the government said, you're open. And what happens is each of us has got to figure out, you probably can't do that, but each of us in our own way, like right now, the book business, we were scheduled in Washington, D.C. at exactly this time to be talking to 11,000 people today, and in Florida to be talking a week or a month later to 13,000. Well, the client calls up and said, hey, look,
in Texas,
Mark and on. Mark and Crystal, we really want you, but look, we're shut down. And just that one guy in Washington, D.C. and New York, it's a life insurance meeting, because I'm still doing those, or we're still doing them. And he said it cost us $2.5 million just to close down. So of course we gave him another idea. We said, look, let's do a podcast to all your members and let's keep this thing moving. And we've got to keep moving. And all of us are going to have to go virtual. Like one of my friends said this morning, Zoom, which is now big, right, is just become a verb in America.
Yeah.
You're going to get Zoom. Zoom.
Are we zooming?
It's very true. Yeah. And I love that you're all about, again, just changing your mindset, changing the direction, the perception, pivoting a little bit. Where can people, go ahead.
You're going to ask where can people buy the book?
Yes. I was going to say, where can they buy the book? Where can they learn more?
We want all of you to go to Amazon.com and get at least one copy and then send the receipt to reception at markvictorhansen.com. And if you do that, we're going to give you 3 great things. First of all, we're going to invite you to those seminars when they open up.
Yeah.
Second of all, we're going to invite you to other podcasts we do, of course. And third is we're going to give you $250 worth of electronic goodies by the 2 of us. So that we think that's pretty good. But if you are in the position that you can buy a whole lot of books, 100 or more, and we've had universities do that. Yeah. We've had big churches do that. Because yes, they're closed today, but they're going to be open in the near tomorrows, we believe. If you buy 100 or more and send it again to reception at Mark Victor Hansen. This is a bold ask, but it's been working enormously well for us. We're very, very thankful. Famous people and institutions and universities are doing it. And send us that receipt. Several things happen. One is we're going to invite you to a one-day seminar with us where we're going to teach some, and then we're going to have the most intensive asking ever done. And she will go into that in depth, and then finalize. We're going to bring everybody to our house and have a most magnificent celebratory dinner at Mark and Crystal's house here in wonderful Sonoran Desert.
It'll be a day of asking immersion to really just launch this decade, because this is going to be a great decade. We are going to come roaring back, and we need to be prepared. How can we be better prepared? How can we become master askers? So that one-day event is going to be incredible. We're really going to go deep into some of these, do some guided visualization, get strong, and wrap it up with a dinner at our house. So
I want to say one more thing. We're going to talk about the 7 businesses that are going to do $50 trillion before this decade's over. Simple things like how to turn trash into cash. We got to recycle everything. And I was talking this morning to the guy at QCI who owns it and has spent 20 years and $300 million figuring out how to take and make sure we have the metal, make sure we have recycled all of our plastic, every atom and everything can be recycled 99% and have adequate water. We're in an interesting time. We're going to talk about what AI is going to do for people. But there are 7 of these industries that if 5G, which in a very short time, by the end of this year, everyone will have 5G ability. And if I want to send myself somewhere, I will be able to do a 3D, what's called an avatar coming out of my phone. I will be with you there, Keri, and Crystal and I will be physically, not physically with you, we'll be in those same images. I got to tell you that I grew up Lutheran, so we watched the movie on Martin Luther, and then we were invited to the opening of the Museum of the Bible, and we walk in, and there's this bald-headed guy that's maybe 5'2", and I go, holy cow, he looked alive. The image was that good. And I walk up to go shake his hand and I go straight through him. Yeah. It was amazing. And that's what an avatar is.
That is so exciting. And I appreciate that you're doing it. And I congratulate you on, again, pivoting and thinking outside of the box, thinking and doing something different. And I thank you both for being here today, answering some of the guest questions, my questions. And again, if you're interested, definitely check out their book. I really enjoyed it. I really love the stories, and I love the assignments and the questions that are there too, which is a huge help to all of us. So thank you so much. And I look forward to hearing more about your events coming up.
All right. Our pleasure, Keri. Thank you so much. We'll talk soon.
Bye-bye, everybody.